Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Brian and Jim with DrinkABeerandPlayAGame, and today we're going to be reviewing Altered Beast for the Sega Genesis.
Released in 1988 to the arcades, this was developed and published by Sega. Oddly enough, it was designed by Makoto Uchida, who was also known for the Golden Axe series, so this guy was kind of the king of the early Genesis days.
Jim, is he related to Lyoto Machida?
I can only wish, Bri. I can only wish. Anyway, this was a launch title for the Genesis. And not only that, it was the first packing game for the system as well, and it really showed how Genesis did what Nintendo don't.
Goddamn Sega fanboys gotta throw that in there. Alright, so when checking out these graphics, just remember when you see our scores, this was a launch title for the Genesis. Had this came out 2 years later when Sonic was out and a whole bunch of other games, our scores would have dropped significantly. But realistically, this game's major competitor was NES, and nothing on NES looks like this. The sprites are very big, they're detailed, the ancient Greek background all looks actually pretty good. There's a decent amount of scrolling in the background, and you even have a lot of foreground objects. One complaint with the goddamn foreground objects, and Jim will talk more in the gameplay, is they can get in your way sometimes, so that's annoying. But regardless, there's a pretty decent color palette, and the shadowing on a lot of the enemies is pretty impressive. Our favorite thing and what really kept the score high are the sweet-ass transformations. Just take a look at that. So as you see from the scores, we both gave it a 7. Once again, remember this was a launch title. And you know what, we'll add 2 beers, just because when Jim and I played this game while drunk, there was a shit ton of flickering and it just annoyed the piss off of me.
Oh, the sound. Do I really need to say anything more than, "Welcome to your doom"? Yes, I know, it's legendary and it's pretty bad. But to the game's credit, the power-up voiceover doesn't sound too bad. Power up. As far as the music goes, it's pretty much not really memorable or anything special, except for probably the sound of when you're in monster mode, because you're going to hear that in every level and you're going to hear it a lot. Outside of that, the sound effects are pretty minimal, to be honest with you. And the ones you have don't sound great, and if there's a lot going on, you're gonna miss a couple sound effects as well. But, I mean, it's not the worst package in the world, and the Genesis in the wrong hands can be known for a lot worse. So, what the hell, it's fine, it's mediocre, and that's why we gave it 5s. I'm gonna add 2 beers just for that beautiful "Welcome to your doom." Alright, it's still fun to do 20 years later.
I'm gonna preface the control with this. For the Sega Genesis, this is as simple a control scheme as you can expect. There's a punch button, a kick button, and a jump button. And really, all you're going to be doing is moving forward and bashing the shit out of enemies. Now, when you transform into some of the monsters, like the dragon, you're going to be spamming the shit out of his lightning special attack, and it's just mindless. There's really not that much strategy or skill involved, except for memorizing where pitfalls are and how to defeat an enemy. With that being said, there's still a really odd stiffness in some of the earlier animations, like for the kick. The punch really isn't too bad, but some of the ducking attacks, it feels like there's a delay. And when Jim and I went through this game, granted we were drunk, it just seemed a little more problematic than we would have liked. So with all that being said, we still didn't find too many problems with it, and I'm just being a little nitpicky. As you see from our scores, we both gave it 7s. Definitely not perfect, but it's very playable. As far as beer, I'm gonna add 1 because look at how pathetic this kick looks. Like, what the hell is that? Even if it does have some lightning behind it or whatever, the force, I don't know.
Fuck. Alright, the gameplay. Well, it's basically very simple beat-em-up action. But it does have the twist of turning into the monsters. But an added twist is that you can't fight the boss until you're in monster mode. So, if you get to the main enemy and you're not a monster yet, you're gonna have to continue on the level until you transform. Which is a kind of cool mechanic, actually. And it forces you to really be on your guard, because the longer really you're not fighting the boss, is more chances to take damage. And this isn't the easiest game in the world. It's not the hardest at all. But it does take some getting used to, and it does take some learning of the enemy patterns and where stuff comes in. As Brian mentioned, there are foreground objects that can block your vision. This gets very annoying, especially in the bear level with the caves. Holy crap, are you prone to some cheap deaths there. But besides that, there's a couple levels, I think there's, 5 in total. The animations are cool, each monster mode plays differently except for the golden werewolf. And it's a beat 'em up, what can I say? You don't have any real special moves unless you're in monster mode. There's no special button combinations to pull off attacks. It's as simple as it gets, but it's mindless fun. Brian gave it a 7, I gave it a 6. What can I say? It's early, but it's fun, and it's a little goofy, what the hell. As far as beers go, I'll add 1 beer for changing into a different monster each level. Yeah, that'll work.
I like the werewolf!
God, yes, I know you like the werewolf.
As far as the originality, this was one of those scores that Jim and I had to go back and forth on. But hear us out. It's definitely not the most original as far as game mechanics, because as Jim mentioned, it's just a side-scrolling beat-em-up. Where we find the most originality is the setting in ancient Greece and the transformation into monsters. Yes, we know other games were set in ancient Greece. And yes, we know other games have power-ups. But this is one of those cases where, as you're playing it, if you haven't played anything before this, it feels like a new experience. And really, that transformation, man, that's what you live for. And that's the moment in this game where you're like, oh, that's that altered beast moment. And from this point forward, when games would have you transform, you would always think back to this game. With that being said, we're still trying to stay objective. I gave it a 4, Jim gave it a 5. I'm only going to add 1 beer. Like we mentioned, this was a launch title, so they probably wanted to do something safe, but throw a few new ideas at you. They probably just didn't want to overwhelm the system right up front.
For playability, I'll keep this short. There's a 2-player mode, there's a 1-player mode, so playing with a buddy, it's fun. Also, the game, like I said before, it's not easy. It's not terribly hard, it's not NES hard, but it's not easy, and you're not going to beat it your first time. You won't beat it your first couple times. It'll take you a while before you finally do beat it. All your repeat gameplay will come from just trying to beat it. With that being said, we both gave it 4s. Not much to say here. As far as beers go, I'll add 2 beers for 2 game modes. Why not?
So overall, you heard us talk about the good and the bad, and even the ugly with this game, but Jim and I have to confess, this is still just a guilty pleasure game to us. We know it's not the best game in the world, but as you'll see from our scores, this is one we just enjoyed doing. Hell, we enjoyed it so much. Yes, it's a shameless plug, but we did a drunken long play of this. I still love this game, and in fact, I liked it more than Jim. I gave it a 7, he gave it a 6. Not everyone's gonna like this. Either people are nostalgic and love the shit out of it, or they hate it and don't see what the appeal is. You should pick up a copy and give it a try. But as we round up all of our scores together, it comes out to a 5.8. Now that is a fair score for this game, and we know nostalgic diehards for this series will probably want us hung at the cross because they think it's an amazing game. But let's be realistic. It's very linear, and it's very limited in its replayability. It's just not a very deep game. Doesn't mean we don't personally enjoy it, it just means let's be realistic about what this deserves. When it comes to beer pairing, we're gonna go with the Stagmeyer Pumpkin Ale. This is a beer made by the same people who brought us Lion's Head. So, you got a flavorful pumpkin beer that's really cheap, and it comes around seasonally. So while everybody else is spending tons of money on other pumpkin beers, get a case of this for like 25 bucks and sit back and enjoy your childhood memories of Altered Beast. And as always, remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly. As always, guys, thanks for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, or better yet, why not subscribe? Till next time, guys, cheers.